Hello, this is UKRLIFE with Lyudmila Nemyrya, and we continue our broadcasting from Kiev. And we are very happy that our guest today is General Ben Hodges. General, morning, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you once again for the privilege.
Thank you. General, once in your interview, you told me that the map of Russia's Ukrainian war is always on your table. You even show it me. And take into account that let me ask you about the prospects or perspective of 2025. What do you think about the situation on the battlefield? What do you think about the possible offensive of Russia and how you assess the current state of Ukrainian and Russia's army?
So, first of all, the perspective of the individual soldier or the families is that, it's just a terrible fight. It's very difficult. Families are getting attacked at night in their apartments and their homes. And for soldiers that are fighting around Pokrovsk and places like that, it's very difficult. But if you can step back from the map and think about where we are, where this conflict is now, I think what General Cavoli said a month ago in his testimony in front of the Congress, that Ukraine is actually winning on the battlefield. That was powerful. It was important because he has access to information that, others would not have. And it also was powerful because it was against what the Trump administration had been saying, that there's no way Ukraine can win. Come on, you got to make a deal. And here's General Cavoli, the top soldier in all of Europe, saying, well, actually, Ukraine is winning. Excuse me. So I think you have to put it in a context. The Russian Air Force, it delivers missiles and bombs against innocent Ukrainians, civilians and civilian targets, but they do it from inside Russia or over the Caspian Sea or the Black Sea. They don't dare fly into Russian or Ukrainian airspace. They have not been able to defeat or destroy one convoy bringing equipment and ammunition from Poland into Ukraine, not one. The Black Sea Fleet, nobody even talks about the Black Sea Fleet anymore. And the Russian army has, depending on who you believe, has close to 900,000 casualties. And yet, for what? What have they achieved? So I think that Russia cannot knock Ukraine out of the war. They can keep doing what they're doing because Putin does not care about casualties, his own casualties, but I just don't see them having the ability to overrun or achieve a major breakthrough. Of course, at the same time, Ukraine does not have the ability to knock Russia out of the war unless there is some significant change from the outside.
General, do you think that in that year we will have big problem with weapons because of USA position, because of European Union position, because it is impossible for them to increase the production of weapons very quick, and we saw this in previous time?
Well, it's always going to be a challenge. The United States, I hope our policy will change, but for right now, I don't have any confidence that the Trump administration is going to do anything significant to help. I haven't seen the evidence of that so far, unfortunately. So I think most European countries are beginning to see this also, to recognize that the United States is not going to deliver what is needed. So you see more and more European countries, most recently Germany, but also Sweden, saying that they're going to invest in Ukraine's defense industry as well as producing their own and providing it to Ukraine. So I think we're going to see more and more coming from Europe as Europe gets more and more capable with its own industry. But I've been impressed also with Ukraine's defense industry, the ability to produce things. And if you get Western investment, like we're seeing, like what Germany just announced, it'll never be enough, but I won't say that we're going to run out.
What do you think about the production of weapons in Russia? Do you have any information how you analyze?
Well, this is one place where sanctions have had an effect, that Russia does not have access to some of the things they used to have, or the type steel that they need to make certain weapons. So the quality of what they make is not as good as what it used to be. So that's been the result of sanctions, and this is the kind of economic tool that the West needs to continue to use. Um, the Chinese clearly are supporting Russia here more openly than they were before, as are Iran and North Korea. And this is why I think one of the best things that the West could do would be to go after Russia's oil and gas industry. If Russia could not export oil and gas, or if the prices came down so much, they would not be able to continue the war. They would not be able to buy all the stuff that they're buying from China and North Korea and Iran. And this fragile Russian economic system would, I think, collapse within a year or so. But that would require the West to get serious about stopping these so-called shadow fleet vessels that are bringing oil and gas out of the Baltic Sea and out of the Black Sea to India and China. It would be much better if the United States was involved in helping to do this. But even without the U.S., Europe working together could do a lot of damage to Russia's oil and gas industry. I think they're going to have to. Otherwise, Putin is going to keep doing what he's doing.
Last months, maybe years, show us the great communication among Russia, North Korea, Iran, and maybe China. And does it mean that it could lead for sometimes of weapons coalition, or coalition which produced common weapons, I mean technologies, for example, yeah, and other things? And do you think that our Western partners or in NATO is a real understanding of the situation? Or don't worry, nothing happened, for example?
No, I think most nations and intelligence agencies are aware. They're watching what's happening between China, North Korea, Iran, and Russia. None of this war in Ukraine is not happening in a vacuum. It's part of a larger global context, and I think, of course, the Chinese have their own economic issues. The regime in Iran, I think, is very fragile. Um, so the West, and this is why American leadership is important, and unfortunately, it's missing right now. If we thought globally about the challenges, that if we recognize that helping Ukraine defeat Russia would lead to the isolation of Iran because Iran has no other friends, and it would send a message to China that the West is prepared to defend sovereignty, freedom of navigation, internet, all these things. That would be an important message of deterrence to China. So for me, connecting the dots would be an important part of a strategic response to what this war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is not on an island. It's not separate from everything else. And if we thought like that, then I think we would be much more effective on using our economic tools to put pressure, especially on Russia. Now, of course, when you start messing with gas prices, it has impact on our domestic situation, on European countries as well. And so it's not just a matter of, okay, let's screw with the gas prices, because it has knock-on effects. But I think that the nations, to the point of your question, are aware of much of what China is delivering. We do have visibility on this. What I can't tell is how much technology is being transferred back and forth. The U.S., the Trump administration would very much like to get Iran to stop their nuclear program, for example. But I don't get the sense that there's a strategic approach to this.
General, let's speak a little bit about weapons, because war 2022-2023 looks like a war of artillery and tanks. The war in 2024 and 2025, it's much more like war of drones, artillery, and war. And in 2025, we use drones more dramatically, we and Russia. How it influences for the type of the war, and what do you think, how it's changed, or what is the challenge for air defense forces?
Well, of course, you're exactly right, Lyudmila, that there are so many drones being used by both sides, different types, real and decoy, and the sky is full of these things. So that makes it very difficult for movement, within 20, 30 kilometers of the front line, for resupply, for evacuating casualties, for building up forces. That has changed the character of the war where the contact is. So to me, one of the adaptations then is to get more longer range precision weapons that can reach deeper into Russia to hit the airfields from which these bombers are taking off, to hit headquarters, and to hit the logistics where ammunition and transportation and these things are located. That's how I think Ukraine neutralizes Russia's advantage of mass, big numbers. So it seems like defense production and modernization is going to increasingly focus on long-range precision weapons. That's what Germany has announced they're going to help Ukraine do. We have a saying: it's better to kill the archer than to try and knock down all of the arrows. You can't. There's too many arrows flying through the sky. You cannot knock them all down. But if you can destroy the place from which those missiles and drones are being launched, that's the archer. If you can destroy that, then you don't have to try to intercept all the arrows. And so having weapons that are, as we talked about, my map of Ukraine, I look and I see this famous Russian air base of Angel, for example, on the Volga River up here. The Russian bombers are taking off. Let me see if I can show. Mm-hmm. So Russian bombers take off from there, and they launch missiles against Ukrainian targets. So if Ukraine has the ability and the quantity, not ones or twos, but 10s and 20s of drones that can go that far, and that it can also carry a big enough payload to wreck that air base, that's the kind of capability I think that will help Ukraine, and that also will reduce Russia's ability to continue killing innocent Ukrainian civilians.
General, in the days preparing for the NATO summit, in your articles and in your interview, you talk about the importance of NATO reforms and strengthening NATO eastern flank. For example, it is an absolutely brilliant article in the Center for European Policy, NATO and the end of military indulgence. Yeah, it is very interesting article because you say that NATO need to resolve the issue of mines and the cluster munition. And you talk as well in one of your interviews, you talk about the importance and future of United States bases in Europe. Does it mean that you believe that the war between Russia and NATO is inevitable? And if it is possible, just tell a little bit about these articles, because I think it is very important for the reforms of NATO in general.
Well, first of all, I think the war, it's already started. what Russia does against NATO countries already in the Baltic Sea, for example, the destruction of underwater infrastructure, the sabotage of different places, factories, assassination attempts, disinformation, interference with elections, cyber attacks that go on all the time. I spoke to a German government official the other day who said that they are attacked every single day by cyber. So I think the Russians, even though it's not war like in Ukraine with missiles and bombs and soldiers killing each other, the Russians are at war with us, and we're still sleeping. We can't believe that Russia would actually, do this. We, the collective West. And so the sooner that the West realizes that Russia is at war with us, and then we take the steps necessary to stop it. Why are Russian ships or so-called shadow fleet vessels, why are they allowed to move through the Baltic Sea, violating territorial waters? And when the Estonians go out to stop one, then you have a Russian fighter aircraft violates Estonian airspace to interfere with the Estonians. So NATO has got to figure out, how do we get control of the Baltic Sea, for example? How do we protect infrastructure? How do we protect our societies? So it's not just about having new air defense weapons and new tanks and new airplanes and that sort of thing. It's also about a more robust defense of our civilian infrastructure and our institutions, and having policies that allow us to stop what Russia is doing. That's the reform that's needed the most.
General, you say that it is important for NATO to strengthen its eastern flank. Do you consider Ukraine as a part of eastern NATO flank? And what our Western partners mostly think about that?
Well, this is a very interesting question. Of course, I believe that NATO would be stronger immediately if Ukraine was already in NATO, and that Russia would never have attacked Ukraine if Ukraine were in NATO. But we are where we are. So what do we do about it? I think that most serious people believe that Russia will not stop. If Ukraine fails, if we allow Ukraine to fail, that Russia will attack, will continue their attack, whether it's against Moldova or against a NATO country such as Latvia, Lithuania, something like that, or even Romania. Not to overrun, but to break the alliance, to launch a kind of attack that would take part of the territory of a NATO country, to see, does the West respond? Does the United States respond? Do we fulfill Article 5? Because if we don't, then Russia would have achieved their objective of breaking the cohesion of the alliance. So I think that whatever they might do against us, against NATO, it won't look like it does in Ukraine. It would be a different kind of attack. And I think it's very feasible, and I think it's very possible within the next 2 or 3 years.
Today, Ukraine's membership in NATO looks like elusive. Yeah. Do you foresee that Ukraine could once again be sandwiched between NATO well-fortified eastern flank and Russia?
Well, that's certainly a possibility. And I don't, here we are just 3 weeks away from the NATO summit, and you don't hear any conversation about this being even a topic. Although President Zelensky has been invited to the summit, Ukraine will feature in the agenda. You don't get the feeling that membership is going to be discussed. And certainly the American president, the current American president, does not give any indication that he would support it. Quite the opposite. So I do think that most European countries understand, and Canada, that failure of Ukraine against Russia will dramatically increase the risk for the rest of Europe, both in terms of Russian action as well as Ukrainian refugees, the inability to do a reconstruction of Ukraine. So most European countries understand it's in their interest that Ukraine is able to defend itself effectively. And I think that's the approach that most are taking.
Trump administration increased defense expenses, and maybe next summit of NATO will decide to increase the till 5% the defense expenses. I think it's dramatically changed the situation, but only with the money. But what about the weapons? What about the other things? What do you think about that?
Well, the United States is not at 5% yet. So if the president's demanding that other countries get to 5%, the U.S. will also have to do that. I think too much attention is focused on new weapons, and not enough attention in Europe, in NATO, is focused on readiness, on the ability to do tasks. Do you have enough women and men in uniform in all of your formations? The German army is not big enough. Most of the armies of Europe are not big enough. Are you training? Do you have the fuel, the ammunition, the maintenance to do what you're supposed to do? I would say no. So it's not just about spending money on new equipment. It's about training, manning, maintenance, what we call readiness. Are you prepared to do your job, whatever it is inside your military? Can most of your aircraft operate? Can your ships do their job? This is where I think so much focus on 2%, 3%, 5%, and on modernization, not enough emphasis on readiness. That was a problem in Ukraine. Before February of 2022, Ukraine was still not where it needed to be in terms of readiness of all of its forces. You had places and you had quality leaders in many places, but overall, the military was not fully prepared to fight. And so now, of course, it is. It's the best army in Europe, Ukraine. But we want to get to the point where you're ready, so ready that the Russians can see, don't want to attack. That also includes, by the way, the ability to move quickly around Europe. And we are nowhere near where we need to be. We do not have enough air and missile defense in Europe. This is a problem.
Take into account the position of President Trump. What do you think about the future of NATO? Do you think that this summit will have big influence for the future of this?
Well, of course, I think people have their fingers crossed and are sitting at the edge of their chair, wondering what he's going to do. Is he going to be there? Will he even show up? Will he show up and then blow the whole thing up? He is a narcissist. He wants to be the center of attention for everything. And I think that most other European leaders understand this. They know him by now. And I think in order to keep the Americans involved with nuclear deterrence and other capabilities, I think they hope that he'll show up and brag and take credit for all the other nations increasing their defense spending, and they'll be happy if he does that. just to keep him interested. But he could. I mean, he could show up and say, thanks to me, I did this. Everybody's spending more on defense. Okay, good. Check. You can have credit, Mr. President. Just make sure the Americans don't leave. I think that's more likely than him saying, screw it, we're out of here. We don't need this, because I think people in the Congress know how important NATO is for America. And most professionals know how badly we need allies, that the United States cannot do it all alone. And all of our best and most reliable allies come from Europe, as well as Canada and Australia. So I think that the most likely he will arrive and he'll take credit for all the good things and bark at others for not doing enough. And then that'll be it. I hope that's what comes out of it.
General, and last one question. Do you think that ceasefire is possible?
Right now, no, because the Trump administration, their approach has been a total failure. The administration never appreciated from the beginning the history, the culture, the geography, why Ukraine's fighting. What that they couldn't even say that Russia is the bad guy. I mean, they never from the beginning. It's been doomed to failure. And I don't hear anything even today coming from the Trump administration that gives me hope that they finally get it. Even when President Trump, on the 2 or 3 times when he said anything critical of Putin, like he's gone crazy, I mean, the whole world is laughing at that because Putin is exactly who he's always been. But I think President Trump is trying to create some distance, like, oh, it's not my fault. Putin went crazy. And at the same time, then he criticizes President Zelensky too. So I hope I'm wrong. I hope that he will finally wake up and realize that the Russians are mocking him. They have no respect for him or the U.S. Administration, and that he will finally get angry because of how Putin has treated him and disrespected him, and use all the leverage that the United States has. But when I listen to things from Secretary Rubio or General Kellogg or this Mr. Witkoff, who is totally incompetent, I don't have any hope that the U.S. is going to force it. So this is where European leaders, plus Canada, if they come together, the combined economies is enough that it could put real economic pressure on Russia. And I think Russia only comes to the conclusion that they would have to agree to a ceasefire if they are damaged economically. I mean, if their oil and gas, if that's severely damaged, then I think they would have to come to the table and agree to some kind of a ceasefire. But right now, because Russians don't care about their own casualties, I don't see a ceasefire happening anytime soon. And I agree that with President Zelensky's government that you have to have a ceasefire before you can negotiate.
General, thank you so much. Thank you so much to be with us today.
I always appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.